All right, greetings, you happily miserable accursed. It's Hurley here, along with your ever-loving, ever-cussing, ever-obsessing about ad hominem attacks in the YouTube comments political panel. Scott Reed, Jordan Leichnitz, and Fred. I've 1 month in, and I've only been called a fake conservative 7 times. Delory, congrats, Fred. That's a pretty decent ratio. We keep an official tally of these things around here, so we'll update it from time to time. Scott's been called beer and popcorn boy 131 times, and Jordan, a woke lady socialist living in a government-funded bubble, 75 times.
God, I only wish. Where do I sign up for that?
The government-funded bubble?
Yeah, sounds great.
I think it's
me with a good time.
I think it's called Ottawa.
Yeah, fair.
All right, here's the show today. There's a new Pierre Poilievre in town, and we're going to talk about it. We'll examine the change of tone in his economic club speech, and that'll lead into our cursed clipping from Susan Delacourt opining in the Star about the interview Poilievre gave to Peter Mansbridge, which I think is being released today. We haven't been able to listen to it, but you can, I think. Then we'll do a little Prime Minister Carney week in review, his positioning on the war in Iran, his trade mission to India, and a few other pieces. And finally, it's Mr. Pinsent and our Hey Yous. How is everybody?
Good.
Wonderful.
Really?
Perfect. Flawless.
Flawless. Well, that's not for you to judge, really.
Flawless. I mean, yeah.
Guess we'll find out, Scott.
I'm like brush steel, baby. I'm beautiful.
I had a nice weekend.
What'd you do?
Okay, so I had a little moment with some friends and my kids that like healed my heart after that fucking shit show from the U.S. men's hockey team last week, which was just so depressing. So, where they laughed at Trump's misogynistic joke about the U.S. women's team. Never mind, it took the U.S. men's team 45 years to get where they got, and the U.S. women's team did it at the last Olympics. That's okay. But I was out with just at the neighborhood rink. We have outdoor rinks here, obviously, and with some friends and their daughters play
in Ottawa.
Yes, in Ottawa. Well, when the drainage is as it is, that is sometimes true. Anyway, my friend's daughters play ringette, and so we were out on the neighborhood rink, and they'd brought their ringette sticks in the ring, and so we were playing in one half, and these are younger kids, sort of 8 years old. And so my son was playing with them. And then on the other end of the rink, there were sort of three hockey bros, in their 20s, firing pucks at each other. And at one point, my buddy went over and said, "Hey, like, do you guys want to play ringette with us?" And they were like, "Yes, I absolutely do." And so we checked all the sticks in the middle, and we made up two teams, and we played like just an awesome game of ringette for like 45 minutes with these hockey bros who were super into it. And
the first annual Woke Cup. This is going to be huge.
I have to say, it healed something in my heart. They were so into it. They were like, and it is actually a little bit, if you've only played hockey, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to get the stick in the ring. We had a good time, and the kids felt really like great about it. And so shout out to those types of hockey dudes. We need more of you. So that was good. That was a nice little high point in my weekend.
Yeah, see, take your toxic masculinity and fuck off.
How can it be? I marrying our friend Jordan's lovely story with your reference to YouTube comments. Some guy took a clip of us last week with me talking about Brady to Chuck, put it on, and some guy, of course, has to comment about how like Scott Reed is a champion ringette player, because that's like the ultimate put down, right? Of course, he spells Scott with one T and ringette with 4 G's. So like, you have
well,
to
I'll see him on the rink next
context,
fucking weekend. So. Then, let's see.
Hey, Fred, judging by your backdrop, you're either on the road or newly divorced.
I'm on the road.
They're not mutually exclusive, David.
But I actually put in a lot of effort this weekend to clean the house as spotless as I could make it before I did hit the road for 4 or 5 days. So,
where are you?
Right. We don't want to hear that. Turn your camera off. You're going to talk like that. We don't want that's you're not helping anybody
Scott
else.
needs all the tips. Stay safe, Fred. Stay safe.
Yeah, no, I'm in Toronto for the mining conference. There's lots happening.
PDAC, that's right. Yeah, I may see you tonight. I'm at a reception there tonight. Yeah. So consider this piece a follow-up to last week's message on sovereignty from our presenting sponsor, Telus. A sovereignty sequel, if you like, because there's more to be said. You might recall that Telus is advocating for a stronger definition of sovereignty and a tiered system that classifies the different types of company structures out there, so the government can more effectively enforce their Buy Canadian policy. Because a blanket definition of what constitutes a Canadian business isn't as cut and dried as it might appear. I won't get into what separates the three gold, silver, and bronze tiers again. That was last week's ad. But suffice to say, truly Canadian sovereign businesses not only have their infrastructure here, but their operations and control remain within Canada. Plus, they have existing long-term commitment to Canadian innovation and deployment. At the same time, the tiering system also makes room for foreign-controlled companies who do have significant operations and meaningful investment here. Sovereignty, not solitude, as the minister has been quoted saying. For companies like Telus, but certainly not only Telus, it's a matter of putting our top-tier support behind our own industries, our own services, and our own considerable expertise. We all know the context: a rupture of the old world order and rapidly shifting global trade. Canada has been a leader in calling it out and recognizing the need for stronger sovereignty. Telus applauds and says, let's follow the talk with clear definitions and actions, so the benefits of Buy Canadian are actually realized by Canadians. All right, let's talk about Pierre Poilievre. He certainly wants us to talk about him. He had a big week last week. He gave a big speech that was promoted very heavily. They wanted us to see it in Toronto at the Economic Club. And then he gave an interview at Peter Mansbridge, which will be released today, I think, on Peter's podcast. But they obviously gave permission for that podcast to be released to media in advance, or negotiated that would be released to media in advance, because Susan Delacourt wrote about it, and I think the Globe and Mail had a story about it too. So let's start with the speech, which was really about economics and designed to reposition him on the Trump Canada-US file, I think most fundamentally. I thought he positioned himself pretty close to the government's position, if perhaps a little less existentially in its tone, but pretty close to the government's position, and leaving him to position his critique as, I don't disagree with what they're saying, I disagree with what they're doing about it, which seems to me to be much, much better ground to be on. Fred, were you pleased with what you heard last week?
Absolutely, and I have to be, because I've been asking for this for 11 months,
Right.
for this sort of messaging. This is exactly what I think he should be doing, in that, everyone wants Carney and the government to succeed with this issue. So give them all the rope that they can hang themselves with on it. Be supportive of it, and just, if the execution doesn't happen well, if Carney and the Liberals fuck this up in any way, then you have an opportunity. But if they succeed, the country succeeds, and there's no fighting that. And I think that's a bit of maturity too. And the game has changed so much since Trudeau left. And it took a long time for the Conservatives to really realize that, I think. And trying to make Carney look like Trudeau and tie him to past Liberal issues over the last decade just was not working, isn't going to work. The people have moved on to other issues right now, and I think, now that he's into this battlefield, now that he's at least talking about it, maybe we'll see his negatives shift. Right now, Poilievre's biggest problem is people don't like him. And if he looks supportive, if he looks like he's being a team player, if he looks like he wants to see the prime minister succeed and the country succeed, and this is a way he can do that. So obviously the best thing for Poilievre is time. He's going to need a year or two to fix those numbers. And the real question remains, though, is, where's caucus on this? How does he keep them disciplined? Or I shouldn't say keep them disciplined. That's clearly not the case. There is no discipline right now in the Conservative caucus, or very little. So that's right now, he's made it through this part. And now he's got to figure out a way to wrestle that down, that blue demon inside the party that just wants to go out and do its own thing all the time and try to get people on his message. And that's going to be, I think, a major, major challenge.
Right. Okay, Scott, what did you take? I mean, this was a clear tactic employed. They signaled it. I mean, we all know what it was intended to do. Did it do it?
I think it's beginning to do the minimum thing, which is try to neutralize this issue somewhat. I don't think we're anywhere near there. I mean, look, ultimately, if people are going to vote in the next election on the basis of who they trust more when it comes to dealing with Trump, they're going to pick Carney. And I think he knows that. But I think he also knows, after 11 months of hearing it from Fred and from a million others, that he cannot leave a vacuum on this issue and leave, therefore, the impression possibly that he is sympathetic to Trump. That's cancer. And so he's tried to take that off the table. I thought a couple things, by the way, Fred just said, like in passing, something that was true, but is stark, right? Fred just said and I'm not hammering Fred on this. I'm just saying because I think it's true. Just said in passing, look, Poilievre's problem is that, people don't like him. And it's like, ouch, right? Like that's a heck of a thing to have to confront, right? Because then there's really only two options. Well, we need to change people, right? Or we need to change me. And they tried for a year to change people, and that didn't seem to play out too well. So now he's trying to change him. I thought that more interesting. I'm keen to hear Peter Managers' podcast. It's so much better than your work, David. And I just think that, as a rule, and I just think it will be interesting because I thought Delacourte's column was just a little, like, you don't have to be so, look at your face. It's just a little joke. Jesus Christ, you poor wounded bird. I'm kidding.
No, you hurt me. You really hurt me. And I'm thinking about how hard I worked to be able to say Lieberich on the on my latest guest, and I don't think Peter would have put that work in. I think he'd have mailed it in and gone Lieberich, like most people do. But I really work at this. I take it professionally. I treat it like a craft, and then you come along and fucking insult me.
Right? You know what? You could have.
Next thing you're going to be pointing out how big my nose is or how fat I've gotten since I've quit smoking. Right?
We've read about enough of that on Twitter over the last few weeks. So we're okay.
That's the YouTube's full of it. I don't like this new fat Hurley. Get rid of that guy. He's a fake liberal, a fake conservative, and he looks like a ball of goose fat. Look, I don't think any of those things. I'm just kidding. But I'm kind of keen. To be honest, I was more struck by the tone as conveyed by Delacourte about this podcast. So I'll be curious about that. I think that could be more measurable because it starts to deal with the does anybody
but that's
like
the next thing we're supposed to be talking about. So right now what you're saying is I don't really want to talk about the Economic Club speech. I want to talk about the interview, which is fuck off. You're not in charge of this. Okay, Jordan, geez. What did you think about the Economic Club speech?
Man, I'm not surprised Scott didn't do his homework. I mean, what else is new? But
I consumed the speech.
No,
I didn't think the speech was as fantastic as everybody else, by the way.
He only prepares for Vashi on Friday, and then we get leftovers, whatever the fuck. Right?
I understand. I know.
I mentioned Peter. You mentioned Vashi. Oh my God, it's jealous quarter here in.
Should Fred and I step out? Do you guys need a?
Yeah. Back in the 70s and early 80s, when Francine Leclerc and Karen Zajic signed on to work for our sponsor CN, they were, a little out of place. Railroads were run by men, and that was that. Both women started out braking and manipulating rail cars. It was heavy, potentially dangerous work, pulling and inserting steel pins joining rail cars, coupling and decoupling massive rolling behemoths that move with astounding force and inertia. Francine was also assigned to work the most difficult track switches by bosses who wanted to see if she was powerful enough to handle them. She was. I have always been very physically strong, she says. The National Film Board even made a short movie featuring Karen on the job, laboring among shirtless men. You have to be able to handle it, she tells the camera. A lot of girls couldn't do it, just like a lot of guys couldn't do it. Anyway, time moved on, as it does, and Francine eventually became a supervisor, then an engineer. She and Karen broke ground, just as an earlier generation of women moved into jobs vacated by men who went off to fight in the Second World War, taking on work as conductors, welders, oilers, and painters. And a lot of them, like Francine, managed to do it while raising families. Pretty strong indeed. This week, as International Women's Day 2026 approaches, CN offers a collegial salute to the women who elbowed their way into a man's world back in the day. A whole lot has changed in 50 years. CN's criterion for hiring and promotion these days is plain, simple, common sense. The ability to do the job well. Francine notes that railroaders often beget railroaders. And while it's always nice to hear someone talk about what their granddad did for CN, what she wants to hear is, my grandmother worked on the railway. Hear, hear. So, Jordan, here's what I think. I'm going to tell you what I think, and then you can tell me what you think.
Sounds
Okay?
good.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what I think. I think that if Poilievre can move the ground onto, okay, listen, right? Uh, the question is, what are we going to do in Canada? The question is, I accept what Prime Minister Carney says, which is we can only control what we can control. We control it in Canada. And where are they? That feels like reasonably fruitful ground, because who among us wouldn't have thought that maybe there'd be a major project approved by now, that maybe housing would be moving more quickly right now. And so, I'm not saying Carney isn't doing anything. He's busy as hell and doing lots of shit, but it's not obvious what the economic payoff is. So I think that there's ground for Poilievre to work there.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think I think I would take the speech in sort of two parts, the substantive bits and then the tonal pieces. And I think they're both equally interesting. And I also think we should acknowledge right off the bat too that like the bar was pretty low really for him in this speech. When you think that the headline that came out of this for a lot of the coverage was that he was repudiating Trump on the 51st state stuff, because that actually hadn't happened yet, like in a really definitive way. So the bar was pretty much on the ground in terms of what he needed to accomplish there. And I think he very much got over it on that piece. And I was interested to see what were the substantive things that he was talking about. And this goes back to a conversation that we had last week or the week before, I think, where we talked a little bit about like, what is his differentiation point? Like, what's his view on the rupture with the United States? Does he agree that there is a rupture, or does he think that that's a mistake and that Canada should continue to have strong integration with the US? So I think we did get a partial answer to that question. And the way he framed it up in the speech was that Canada should not declare a permanent rupture with the United States in favor of a new relationship with China, which I thought was a really interesting formulation of that. So he's having it a bit both ways in that, but it's a way to acknowledge that something has changed fundamentally in the moment, even though, he's holding out hope that that won't be a permanent thing and that we shouldn't substitute in China. Fine. I think there's lots of policy ground there to take up on that. And I think that that probably serves his domestic political purposes quite well too. I was also struck, as you were, David, that I think there is a lot to speak about for Poilievre domestically. He talked a lot about the biggest barriers to sort of Canada's retooling our economy, our internal barrier, and he's constructed this quite broadly, being around taxes and things like that, not just internal trade barriers, but fine. So again, I think that that's a formulation that works for him. To me, I think the challenge where he positioned himself on these substantive issues is that they're really very close to Carney. There are, we're talking radiations of difference here now rather than being opposite sides of a spectrum on a lot of these issues. So I think to Fred's point, I imagine that there are a chunk of people within the Conservative Party, and certainly even some of the Conservative benches, who are not going to like this. And I was struck that I think what the context that we're hearing this in also is what pushed him into doing this speech, which is not just his 20-point gap on his own personal positives, but a growing gap on the party horse race numbers. So we saw 13 points in Angus Reid. I think we had Abacus out at 6 points yesterday. But there is now that separation happening. And then to cap it all off, that up until that speech happened, what really stood as the Conservative response on Trump was Jamil Javani's trip. So all of those things are what kind of created that moment for him on Thursday, which I think really did lower the bar. Now, tonally, obviously, this is a completely different tone. I think the question on that, though, is will it stick? And to go back to what Fred was saying about the negatives, time is very important. But I think that we need to acknowledge turning around deep negatives, and Poilievre has very deep negatives with the Canadian public, is an extremely difficult job to do politically. It's something actually that is rarely successfully done. and particularly over a longer duration, because yes, you need that time to ameliorate those negatives, but that also means you got to hold this whole rickety ship together and keep that tone while you're trying to do that. And you got to keep your caucus along with you, and you got to keep your party base along with you for an extended period of time if you're going to try to shift those negatives. And the third and last thing I thought was really interesting that was happening last week, kind of in parallel with this speech, is that if you looked around, like, what were the Conservatives doing in the House last week? Well, all of the coverage and, they were pushing out in the media Poilievre speech. Well, they had brought a really, an anti-refugee motion to the House for their opposition day, going after refugee healthcare, like pure red meat for the base. Which, again, on a topic that lines up very closely to some of the stuff we're seeing Trump do in the US. So they obviously see a need internally for counter programming to this kind of an outreach that Poilievre is doing, which makes me think that internally, this is a very difficult thing for him to hold together over the duration that would be necessary to actually fix those negatives.
Right. Well, Fred, I mean, that's sort of I guess, where the rubber hits the road, right? Because you can't give this speech once. This has to be your new mantra, right? You have to say it all the time, and you have to do it in a way that people think is authentic and believable. And so that obviously presents the management issues that they have been avoiding to date. So the fact that they took so long to get to an obvious place, should I infer from that they had been spending that time getting their ducks in a row inside the caucus and inside the party and saying, listen, we're going to have to do this. I know you X person aren't going to be that comfortable with it, but this is why we have to do it. So have they pulled together, have they put this thing together so that it can hold, or are they now going to be looking at possible sort of people breaking from them in caucus or senior people in the party outside caucus?
Look, there's always the risk of that. I don't know what kind of work they put in or why it took 11 months. It could be just looking at the calendar, what he had to go through. He lost his seat last year in the election. And, when the House did come back last spring briefly, the Conservatives were helpful in getting the Bill C-5 through, right? They did get some stuff through. And then the summer just went kind of weird. Poilievre kept popping up. He was a wounded animal, is what he looked like a lot of times doing these press conferences without a seat in front of the House of Commons. And then he had, after he did come back in the fall, and then he was going into his leadership review. So I think he was focused on the tasks at hand that he had to focus on. And once he got through that, my assumption is then he's okay. Now I need to get back onto the battlefield, which is where we are now, because that wasn't the battlefield for those Conservative delegates in Calgary. I know I wanted to hear him talk about it, but I don't think other delegates there were particularly excited to hear him talk about Trump and tariffs. And there was risk. Maybe he would have been booed at the convention if he came up and said anything along those lines. So I think it was getting through that, about getting everyone their ducks in order, ducks in a line. I don't know if he's got that style of leadership. I don't know if he sits down and consults and has that type of conversations with people. I've heard he's a bit hands off on that. So it is a big risk though that he's got to figure out, because to your point and what we've seen with the Jamal Giovannis and the others, they're going to say what they want to say. And this is a team sport, as we all know. And if your own team is dysfunctional and you're not looking like a leader because you're not leading it, your days are numbered. So this is right now, he's got through this, he's got to maintain it. And as I said at the beginning of the show, he's got to find a way to keep caucus on side. Now the bulk of them are, right? The bulk of caucus is there, and they're going to have to do some peer pressure, I think, to whip everyone else into shape.
Right. No secret that I get, how should I put this, animated by excellent data. A large chunk of my career has been the gathering and analysis of evidence to answer questions, track progress on any number of issues, discover new insights, and report on all of it. So it's with these data chops I direct you to the website 440 Megatons, a project of the Canadian Climate Institute, our sponsor and Canada's leading climate policy think tank. Why is it called 440 megatons? Well, that's about the amount Canada has committed to cut its greenhouse gas emissions to by the end of this decade. The first step on the pathway to net zero by 2050. The whole site functions like a clearinghouse for tracking our progress toward building a cleaner, more competitive economy. You can fill your boots with all kinds of accessible charts, graphs, and data-driven insights. Original modeling and analysis that helps you understand the issues driving Canada's path to decarbonization. How quickly are we moving to clean electricity, and what's the emissions impact? How much investment is flowing into clean growth? Are we on track to get to our 2030 emissions target? How fast are people adopting heat pumps? Are consumer incentives working to get people to buy EVs? Visit 440megatons.ca for the answers to these questions and a hell of a lot more. And if you're similarly animated by timely, excellent data, while you're there, you can also subscribe to their newsletter for regular updates in your inbox.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Can I?
Something on the speech?
Yeah, I'd like to. No, this is actually about the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
I'd like to. There's something that didn't quite click with me about the speech, and I think, look, as a matter of triangulation, it was necessary. I thought it was reasonably well pulled off, all that kinds of stuff. So I'm not trying to be chintzy about it, but I disagree with something Jordan said, and I've heard lots of others say it, which is that, now more or less they're in the same place, Poilievre and Carney. And I don't think that's true. I think there's a couple of really important differences that are apparent in the speech. They may be necessary for Poilievre because he has to triangulate. But the fundamental thesis underlying it is a complete contradiction of Davos. In Davos, right, and Poilievre invites this. In Davos, right, the shot heard around the world was, the world is broken. America cannot be relied upon anymore. These big hegemons, the rest of us are going to have to deal with them. And most of the time, we're going to have to buckle. And a few times we can gather together and show some principle, perhaps. But most of the time, we're just going to have to figure out how we scurry around them and manage it as best we can. And Poilievre's message, more or less, and Carney said explicitly, this is the world as it is, not as we want it to be. And Poilievre was in the world of it, the world as we want it to be, through the conservative lens, which is America's there. We love its values of freedom. We love its values as articulated by traditional Republicans, and it's there and it will be there, and we'll get past Trump. And I don't know that that's true, and I don't know that that's going to wear well. So we'll see. Time tells. The other aspect of it, though, is that there's this critique that you'd mentioned earlier that he has to maintain for conservative purposes. And you hear it repeated by people, which is that Carney isn't doing anything. Like, there's no results. Where's the meat, man? And I just point to the polls and say, Carney has been doing nothing for a year, right? Is that your argument? He's been doing nothing for a year? Well, he's boxing your ears as he does nothing. Like, his poll numbers are improving. I think the impression of him as the right person at the right time is deepening among Canadians, including among those that are inclined to vote conservative. And so I don't think that's the right critique. Like, I continue to harp on this. Like, I just think when people see Carney talking at Davos, when they see him in India, yes, they have to make trade-offs about how uncomfortable they are dealing with China and India. But I think people think that stuff that's getting, like, those things matter. Like, he is playing cards, he is doing things, he's building stuff. And I just think there is an impression of change and action. And I don't think he's as it isn't like, well, where's the trade deal with the United States? And if you don't have it, well, then you haven't done anything. I don't think that test is going to be the one he wants to apply, because I think that he's going to find the Canadians don't agree with him, Poilievre, on that. So I think it's a mistake.
Do you think he'd want to go to an election, Scott, without having had a shovel in the ground on something?
You know what? Maybe. I'll tell you right now, the Conservatives do not want to go to an election. I mean, if Poilievre is out there saying we don't want an election until after CUSMA, they're passing the budget bill, they're signaling that they're going to be cooperative in the House, they are removing any possibility. And I don't think that's because they think this is a temporary circumstance. I think they need to fully regroup, right? Give this speech, reassemble their coalition, deal with Giovanni, who's going to go off like a firecracker sometime in the next 8 weeks. Guaranteed, right? That's going to happen. So,
that's the cleavage point, Scott. You've identified it, that is remaining after the Economic Club speech. Fred and Jordan, this is the deal right here, which is Poilievre made it clear America is the deal, full stop. right? Trump's crazy. Trump's an asshole. 51st date's bad. All this kind of stuff. But America is the deal. And so America will, under Trump, probably present some option of renewing CUSMA that will cause great debate in this country about whether it is worth signing or not. And that is the upcoming big fight. The question is whether you have an election before that or an election over that.
Yeah, I'm still of the opinion. I don't think that there are really good political grounds for an election over that. Carney was tasked with that in the last election. And I think most Canadians would think that he has plenty of authority and mandate to negotiate through that. And I just want to come back to something Scott said, because I actually don't think that Carney and Poilievre are in the same place. I think that Poilievre has moved himself closer to Carney, but that is a triangulation. And the difference is that very much Poilievre is still expressing hope that that old U.S. relationship can return. And that's a big difference. That's, I think, a big split for them. But look, like part of what the question that he needed to answer in that speech, and that frankly, that he will also need to answer in the upcoming fight over the CUSMA renegotiation, goes to Poilievre's motivation. Like, why is he articulating a position that would keep Canada closer to the U.S., that holds out hope for that old U.S. relationship to come back? I think, one of his big problems in the past is that he was not able to do that without separating himself from Trump. Every time he did that, he really did end up politically lumping himself in with Trump. He wasn't able to articulate that separation. And I think that the challenge for him coming up is that there are going to be tough trade-offs on the table. And he has to, at all times, be on Team Canada, where, like he's joined up now. So he's not got to remain on that. Through these tough debates, through these regional trade-off discussions that are going to happen when we start to talk about things like supply management, for example, which is coming very soon. And this is where things are going to start to get harder for him, because the differentiation that he's going to need there from Carney is going to necessitate some criticism of the government, while still staying on the side of Team Canada and not being seen to in any way play into or cheerlead U.S. attempts to divide Canadians regionally. And I think that for him is the political challenge that lays ahead, because he's got to do all of that with this rickety apparatus of his vote coalition and his party behind him. He's got to do that while holding, in some way, the Jamil Javanis and the more moderate conservatives united behind him in order to have any hope of rehabilitating those personal numbers. And that is a very tall order, but it gets so much worse in an election. So that's why I think, it was like, just to see him so blandly, we'll see in the Mansbridge interview, but it seems like it's a very bland declaration that there is no interest in an election. And that makes complete sense right now, because that is a crucible for all of these pressure points for him. So he needs that time. But he's going to need a lot of skill to hold it all together through that, because there are many, many pitfalls for him to come.
The following message is brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Not all nicotine products carry the same risk. Smoke-free alternatives, like heated tobacco, vaping products, and nicotine pouches, don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. While not risk-free, evidence shows they have the potential to be significantly less harmful than cigarettes. Yet, Canadian regulations restrict access and limit communication about these alternatives, keeping adult smokers in the dark. Sweden has accepted this science, embraced smoking harm reduction, and driven smoking rates below 6%. Canada has the tools to do the same, but it requires political will. It's time to align regulation with science, expand access to smoke-free products, and empower Canadians to make informed choices. The evidence is clear. The opportunity is real. Canada can be smoke-free. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.
Fred, you got any last thoughts on this?
Just on what Scott had touched on in regards to the criticism of the Conservatives of Carney about not getting things done. I'm not sure what else you could be saying right now that would be make any sense. You could say we're with you, we agree we need to get things built and things moving. And there is risk, of course, if he gets things built and moving in the next year or two, a political risk. But if he doesn't, I think that risk is also on Carney. If things aren't getting built, if these things aren't actually happening, I just don't know what else you could be saying right now, other than that criticism, that things aren't happening.
Yeah, I don't know that it's biting right now, but I think it could bite. I would be laying the groundwork for it right now for sure. Because, there is, I think, whether it's the internal free trade or whether it's the housing policy or whether it's the resource policy, it's a little slower. It's a little slower than people might have thought. Fred, can I, before we leave with you, just there's one thing about the speech, and that's the Marcus Aurelius Stoicism
Mhm.
thing. And um,
Please make a Roman Empire joke.
I don't have a joke. I'm open to a joke. I have a question, which is, was that just a speech device, or was that an attempt to match Carney's old philosopher thing in the Davos speech, or is it a remnant of? I mean, a lot of conservative activists seem to spend a lot of more time reading political philosophy than I have. And so I'll regularly have friends in the Conservative Party say, you got to brush up on your Hayek. And I'll say, no, I don't. I've never read Hayek. I don't even know what the fuck it is. So is this is this some sort of a philosophical thing within the conservative movement, or where did Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius come from as the sort of grounding for this speech?
It's quite funny timing because I don't read a lot. I don't get a lot of opportunities to read, and I started reading that book from Marcus Aurelius a few months ago. I haven't gotten very far, but it's funny that this is that he brought this up. I think it's where Poilievre is mentally in terms of this guy was going to win the largest majority in Canadian history, and you guys know what that's like to not accomplish that. It is painful, and
Fred, Jesus fuck,
You think
well,
he
no,
dove into the
I'm
meditation
trying
thing?
to,
actually
I'm
done,
being
Fred.
am I
empathetic
not
here,
having
guys.
a shitty enough day?
No,
Fuck,
but
I'm
you
wearing a
know,
Joni Mitchell t-shirt for now. Go
but you
ahead.
know how painful that is. Look, I've got big losses under my belt too, and it knocked me out for a year or two. And for Poilievre to go from he was going to win this massive majority until Trump was elected, and that is what changed his entire trajectory in his life. He was going to be prime minister. And it's things that were out of his control. Now things are in his control where he could have taken on Trump last year and possibly done different. But
Yeah.
I think Stoicism, it's an interesting philosophy, and I think he's grounded in that. And I think that's probably why he's talking about it, because it's something that it allows him to fight on,
Yeah.
knowing that not everything is in his control.
You guys just need more experiences with big and frequent losses. And I mean, listen, I think that it's interesting because of course it is a joke, the number of times that men think about the Roman Empire, and apparently conservative men more than others, but it unites, I think, three things that are very appealing to large segments of conservatives, and that's history, power, and right now, escapism.
There we go. All right.
Can I just say, I think this is a contrivance on his part, and this is totally in keeping with his character as we've seen it. He's done this before. Poilievre likes to dress up his unflinching, unchanging argument that all we need to do to have a better world is to lower taxes and shrink government and to permit people to scrape by with their fists and themselves, and that's how you build a better country. That's been his philosophy since he was in grade 7, and he often dresses it up, as is the habit of the brosphere these days, in this kind of Peterson-esque, assuming, apprehended intellectualism. And, Marcus Aurelius and the Meditations, I mean, a million people pronounce Stoicism. I don't think it's a coping mechanism. I don't think he's healing. Like, I think he could go read Shel Silverstein's poems if he wants to heal after a big loss. It'll make you feel better. It'll make you laugh. I just think he's always got this reflex. It's spread your arms and we shall fly. It's this, it's this overreaching thing. It's a real rhetorical bug that drives me up the wall.
I still hate Joaquin Phoenix over what he did to Marcus Aurelius.
Well, I've been told that may not be entirely historically accurate.
Okay.
You know,
All right.
getting-
Not a shortcut for you, David. You might actually have to read it.
Jordan, are you Team Gita or Team Caracalis? I mean, you know,
I would not venture to weigh in.
Safety. It's not something most people think about on a daily basis. But for Enbridge Gas, it's where every day begins. Millions of homes and businesses across Ontario and North America depend on natural gas. Delivering that energy safely is the foundation of the company's work. It starts with a proactive mindset and a belief that every incident can be prevented. That belief is backed by action, says our sponsor, Enbridge Gas. Systems are inspected, tested under pressure, teams are trained, emergency plans are reviewed and updated, strong partnerships with first responders are built. When they think about safety, they're thinking about their employees behind the work, the families waiting at home, the customers who depend on them, and the communities that trust Enbridge Gas to get it right. Keeping communities safe is a shared responsibility. Before any digging project, from landscaping to building a deck, it's important to know what's below. In Canada, visit clickbeforeyoudig.com. One simple step can help prevent serious harm. Enbridge Gas also supports Safe Community Project Zero. Over the past 17 years, the program has helped provide more than 115,000 smoke and carbon monoxide alarms to Ontario fire departments and into homes as a line of defense. Because ultimately, safety depends on each of us. All right, now then later on there was an interview with Peter Mansbridge that Peter teased out over the weekend. God, good for him. What a great podcast he has, eh, Scott?
God, it's. I think it gets better every week.
Yeah. All right, here is excerpt from.
I'm just joking around. My word, you're a gentle bunny.
I'm a little vulnerable, feeling a little vulnerable. All right, so anyway, the from Susan Delacourt's article in the Star. Pierre Poilievre says he would rather work with Prime Minister Mark Carney to fight Donald Trump than plunge the country into another election to choose which man is the better negotiator. The Conservative leader declared that choice in a 40-minute podcast interview with former CBC anchor Peter Mansbridge, featuring some fascinating glimpses into how Poilievre intends to shift his tone this year. The Conservative leader told Mansbridge that he is very deliberately changing his media strategy to talk to as many people as possible, rather than limiting his interviews to sympathetic media or social media blasts. I made a decision on interviews that I'm going to go everywhere and talk to everyone, he said. That means talking to people with whom I disagree or who might cater to an audience of voters who are in different parties. The interview isn't all praise for Carney, with Poilievre punctuating his answers with the many ways he takes issue with how the Liberal government has failed to get a better trade deal with Trump. The Conservative leader says he believes the Liberals have been too quick to concede leverage with the United States and accept that any new deal with Trump will come with tariffs. But it was remarkable to hear him say he doesn't believe Canadians need another election to sort out which approach would be the better one. I don't, he said when Mansbridge pushed him on the election question. I do think that we should work together as parties, and that's why I've made the offer to Mr. Carney that we would set up an all-party committee that would create a united effort on behalf of the whole country to fight for Canada in the United States and in any other market. I think that being united will be a real force going forward. Scott, you've been anxious to talk about this interview. What caught your eye?
I thought that was really interesting. I think there was a tone and a reflectiveness and a depth to that consideration. I know it's powered by Jesus Christ. I can read a poll. Last thing I want right now.
Totally, isn't it just a fetal position wrapped up in some?
Yeah, but he seemed to lean into it in a way that I thought was more persuasive. I just sound like such a dink. I thought the speech was necessary.
Yes, you do, and I'm glad you acknowledged it. But
it's often YouTube and you, David, have recognized the dinkiness of my tone, comments, and manner. But I thought the speech felt like it was given at gunpoint. Like it was, I am saying these words phonetically, the way ABBA sings in English. This is what I must say. And whereas I thought, and I'd be curious to hear the podcast, This seemed to hint at a tone that was a little bit more reflective, a little bit more leaning into and going beyond what he said in the speech, which is like, we got to think, if this is a war, which is the implicit tone there, then we need a national government. We need a unity government. And I just thought that was a little interesting, that tone. I think that's rich territory. And it sounded, maybe, even though it's sparked by fear and weakness in the polling, it sounded a little bit more authentic or sincere, I thought. Maybe we'll have to hear what it sounds like, but I thought he went further than he did tonally in his speech, and I thought that was interesting. And so that's all.
I don't know, Fred. I'm unconvinced by the I don't want an election stuff, because I think people are smart enough to know that if he was 10 points up, he'd be demanding an election.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's just what it is, right?
But he's saying something different there too, though, to what Scott mentioned about how, like, this all-party committee, let's work together, put me to work, Prime Minister, I'll go and do stuff for you on this to help. And I think that is what shifts it. It's not just, no, we shouldn't have an election, let's keep attacking you in the House all the time. Let's actually work together. And I think that could be very helpful. If we talked about his negatives earlier and how bad they are, that, like, he looks like a grown-up, he looks mature, he looks like a statesman here. And I think that's a part of the thing that's been missing over the last while. Like, he was the perfect foil to Trudeau. He's not a good foil to Carney. For one, they're both conservative, so it's a bit tricky there. But he's got this, I think, opportunity to look like he, wants to be helpful. And I think, based on what we read in that story from Delacourt, and what we'll see later on the podcast, is that that's what he's aiming to do. Whether it's true or not, obviously if he's 10, 15 points up, maybe his messaging would be different, and for good reason. People, if it's 10 or 15 up, it means something else is going on bad for the Liberals.
Yeah.
But right now, I think what he's doing could help him on his personal numbers. And again, going on Mansbridge, I was stunned when I heard that he was on Mansbridge, just to begin with. Like, who?
Well, that's sort of the symbol of what they were not going to do prior to the last election, right?
Well, last
if you
election
held up a picture of somebody they were not going to talk to, would be Peter Mansbridge, right?
Yep.
So the fact that they've done it is quite a statement, I think.
And
I
was
won't
on
rest till I see him
BBC.
playing pickleball with Dave Cochran. That's what I want.
Well, going up the last election, like, no one on Cochran's show, no Conservative MPs going on it ever. After the election, it's happening, but before that, there was none. And, like, I was one of the few Conservative voices on CBC, and I can tell you, I was a bit critical at times of the Conservative Party and the campaign.
Yeah.
So it only hurt themselves, and you have this huge demographic that watches that network, that they were not on that battlefield either. So.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like a little bit crazy that we're talking about the revolutionary power of speaking to voters not already in your base, but that is the shift here. Like, and that he's openly talking about this, like, oh, like,
it took Outhouse months to get this. Jesus Christ, the poor guys.
It turns out that if I only speak to the people who already agree with me, that's not more people, and I need more. So yeah, look, I mean, I think it's an inevitable development when the polls are the way they are. I think, to go to what Scott was saying, I'm not, maybe, I don't know that the speech was necessarily, didn't feel to me delivered at gunpoint. I don't think it was his best one. I thought the Q&A after was better. It sounds like, I think Mansbridge is going to be a little bit better tonally as well. And I think that could just be a him thing. But I think, part of it is that he also does.
Peter makes everybody better.
It's that voice, right? Like, he does just need to look warmer. He does need to look more human. He does need to look like he's remotely having a good time. I had a chuckle at the line that Susan Delacourt, they're not keen to have an election. Like, the list of things that he would rather do other than having an election is very long. It's like prostate exam, spending a week with my mother-in-law. It's like literally every other thing, because they are not in a good position. And that is the challenge here, is that what has forced him to these changes. It wasn't the loss of his seat. Okay. It wasn't the immediate aftermath of losing the election that he was supposed to win. It took almost a year to get here. So it's the sustained gap in his personal approval numbers that are now beginning to erode the party numbers. That's what's pushed him here. So it has taken so much, and it's taken so many internal voices also calling on him to change his approach. It's taken so much to get him here. And now the challenge is he has to stay here and he has to look like he's having a reasonably good time while he's doing it. And so that is one of the things that he's going to need to work on.
Meet me at the corner of shift and humility. Yeah. Hot dogs on me.
But what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't get what he wants? So, as we are talking, and as Prime Minister Carney is either in India or Australia or Japan, wherever the hell he is today, there is lots of people in the Liberal caucus. Lots of people in the staff of the government, lots of people apparently around the Prime Minister who believe that there should be an election now, who believe that the Liberals should take advantage of what appears to be not just a lead in the polls, but a momentum in the polls. So you're on the right side of the swing. Catch this wave while it's happening. You never know what will happen again. Fred, is that a good idea?
If they have the right story and reason why it's necessary. It's not right now. There is no story. There's no narrative why there's an election, particularly with the leader of the opposition saying, let's have an all-party. He looks like the grown-up now if you go and call an election. Same time, there's the risk of it. Like I know the polls are good for the Liberals, but campaigns matter and things shift fast. And there's this, if you look at Canada, what the Conservatives have, let's say 90 some safe seats that are relatively safe at their worst. The Bloc Québécois say 15, 20. So that's 100. That's 220 seats left. The Liberals need to win 172 of those to get a majority. Like, it is fucking hard to get a majority government in this country. There's only been 2 in the last 2 decades. So it is not an easy task. It's a lot of risk. And if Poilievre's numbers, let's say if you're a Liberal and you believe his numbers are never going to get better, he's terrible. Why would you want him gone now? Like, govern for another year or 2, then take him on, and then you have another, if you get the majority, 3 or 4 years. So if you take him out now, you're shortening your own time up potentially. So lots of risk, and I don't know if they need the reward right now.
Yeah, I think they want to keep Poilievre as an opponent because he's weak to them, right? So there's a danger in that. But the other thing is that one of the big assets that they have around Carney is his brand as the anti-politician. And the fastest way to torch that is for him to do something cravenly political without a good narrative around the need for an election. So I think that they do have to be very careful about that, because that's actually something that could substantially erode his approval if people don't find it aligns with who they thought he was.
That was Carney.
What do you think? Yeah.
Well, these numbers are so tempting. I agree with everything everyone's saying here. It's Betty likes Archie because Veronica likes Archie. Veronica likes Archie because Betty likes Archie. Now, if Archie picks Betty or Veronica, the whole thing goes to shit. So I think, that's...
I thought Veronica liked Reggie.
No. Reggie sometimes is a friend. Sometimes he's an enemy. Sometimes he flirts with Veronica, but that's all just pretense. Yeah. I mean, really, this is a 3-person story. And the second, as Jordan and Fred have both said, the second that Carney appears to try to cash in on his Betty on those high polling numbers, he's going to lose Veronica, which is the betting public. And so I just think, you've got that challenge. So what I would do, given these numbers are so attractive, is I would say to 3 people in my operation, you guys, right, take my credit card, go to a tavern, and come up with a plan that allows us to call an election and not pay that price. What are the conditions? What would the program be? What would the triggers be? What would we have to do in the campaign to not spend the first 3.5 weeks talking about why we called a campaign and watching our numbers deteriorate and the core brand of the Prime Minister unfold? So, and if you guys can come up with it, then by God, let's do it. Like, let's do it yesterday, because I am attracted to the idea. Like, I'm a partisan. I want to see it happen, but I think it is high risk because there isn't that. I remain of the view that if Trump decides to initiate CUSMA negotiations by tearing up CUSMA and serving the 6-month notice, I still think you can say, That's a big trigger. And I know people, and Jordan doesn't agree with me, but I think you can do that. I think there are risks to that. But I think that is a kind of a, Trump just threw a baseball through our window. And now I'm going to call an election to try to resolve whether we throw it back out or keep the baseball and all that kind of stuff. So that analogy made no point, no sense at all. But I just think you got to be careful.
Well, listen, when you're listening to Jordan, you got to take into account that there's Poilievre doesn't want an election, and then there's fucking NDP don't want an election. Okay, like
no,
like bad.
I mean, which is another reason you want an election, because the NDP are at 9%, and you kind of go, well, like, is that going to hold forever?
Right.
Is
Jordan frozen, or is she? Yes. Is Jordan frozen, or is she just enraged at what I've said?
She reminds. That's the way Miss Menzies looked at me through all of grade 6.
I will just add quickly here, though, one thing to remember: the Liberals may get their majority in a couple of months with these by-elections coming up. If they win, they sweep them, and they win Terrebonne, the one with the traditional bloc seat that they won by 1 vote last election, the Liberals did. They'll have a majority. Obviously, it's 1 seat, and it's hard to govern with a 1-seat majority, but it's still a majority there, and you can still pick off other.
Well, that sounds like a good ham sandwich, but I think he wants steak for lunch, right? Like,
I don't know. If I was him, I would just want the majority, and if I could get it through the floor crossers, I would take it through the floor crossers. To be honest. So I don't know. I don't know what happened to Jordan and the socialist internet, but we got to move forward to Carney. Other than the election, a little bit. Scott, you wanted to talk about Iran. What's on your mind about that?
Well, I think it's a really dynamic situation that that could create political challenge for the prime minister. I thought Carney had no choice but to issue a statement in support of the strike against Iran, and to say, look, obviously we want these people gone and we want this regime. They are terrorists. And he reminded in his statement that Canada has taken that stance for many, many years. They're a formal terrorist organization, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is bad, and destabilizes and is a particular pointed threat to Israel, obviously, in its very existence. So that's great. But I have been interested at how quickly this has just been translated and reduced to Carney supporting Trump. And so now, the whole world has a what's next issue now, right? Like, what happens next? Like, do they actually pry these guys out? Are they going to be forced into, ground troops in order to actually finish the regime off? Who's going to do that? And how's that going to happen?
Well, if you know what the actual purpose of it was, you're ahead of me.
Well, no, of course we do. I mean, I assume it's regime change, because that donkey Pete Hegseth was on TV a couple hours ago saying it's not regime change. Well, then I actually don't know what the hell you were up to then. But then it's what's next, right? And I think Trump. I think the problem is, obviously, with this issue is that people can look at it and go, well, naturally, Canada is against the Iranian regime. But Canadians do not have trust that Trump is going to prosecute this issue in a way, either in terms of his motives or in terms of the likely outcome and his judgment, that is going to be in any way successful or beneficial. And so I do think there's jeopardy, because Trump's driving this car, and, Carney at some point is going to have to say, I said I was in support of that. I'm no longer in support of this thing that's happening now. And I hate the way people compare it to Chrétien in Iraq, because we're not being asked to send troops in. That's not the question. The question right now is, are we just okay with this? And I think the answer is yes, we are okay with this now. But we have no confidence where it's heading, because the guy, again, who's driving is Trump. And Canadians don't like Trump, and they don't have trust in his motives. They don't have trust in his judgment, and they shouldn't. So this is a precarious situation, I think.
But why are we for it? Like, how can we be for a process like that? Fred.
Well, Iran, we've listed them as a nation that sponsors terrorism. I think we've long been opposed to the regime. And if our allies, both U.S. and Israel, believe it needs to be removed and are doing it, I think it makes sense for us to be supporting that. And again, we're supporting it with words. We're not actually doing anything. But words carry weight, and I think as our conservative Prime Minister Mark Carney goes out there and supports this, but I think that's the political risk here. We talk
You
about
keep this up, you're going to have to vote for him, Brett. Okay, so I'm just warning you. You may think it's a clever line, but at some point, you stitch yourself to the guy.
I only vote blue. But I'm a tribal conservative, not ideological. So look, I think there's politically though, there is opportunity for the New Democrats to actually do something here. We keep talking about Carney and how he's, taking Poilievre's ideas, they're working together. Poilievre saying, let's work together. There's this 60% of Canadians are on the progressive side of the political spectrum. And that's wide open territory for the NDP if they can elect a leader that can appeal to a little bit more to the center than what they may be looking at. So there is political risk in some sense for Carney on this, but only if the NDP can get their act together and do something with it.
So, Jordan, I watched the Carney Iran thing, and I assumed to myself that he has to pick his spots about when he takes issue with Trump and when he doesn't take issue with Trump, and therefore probably felt that this was a low-risk way to be supportive of Trump. But, I mean, surely I'm not the only person, and I am a person who is bugged by the fact that suddenly now it's okay for Trump to go around taking out world leaders in different countries. And because I don't really respect that guy's judgment. I don't really want these decisions resting with him, to be honest.
With not even congressional oversight, like nothing, just him. Yeah. Look, I mean, I thought there were a number of things about Carney's statements that were really interesting. And yes, I think there is space for the NDP on this issue because a lot of Canadians have concerns about this. But I thought what was notable about the statement was a few things. So first, it was very fast. His statement came out quite quickly as the strikes were unfolding, very early on among world leaders. The second thing is, just by reading that statement, you can look at it and you can see that he obviously put his own stamp on that statement. That was not a statement as presented that was crafted by the Department of Foreign Affairs. Now, parts of it, yes, but very much the decision to endorse the U.S. action, I think you can clearly see that he put his own stamp on that. And then that's the last part, is that statement went very far in endorsing American unilateral actions in launching those strikes. And I think what's interesting about that is that you have other options, right? Like there are more than two options here. You don't need to either be heavily critical of the US, which is like, we've seen Pedro Sanchez in Spain take that position, or you don't need to wholly endorse the US action of unilaterally going after other countries' leaders, even if they are countries whose leaders are very bad people and very bad regimes. You could be boring. You could elect to have a relatively bland statement. And so what I think was interesting about that is that he clearly chose to take a very definitive position in support of this. Now, I think there's a real risk for him that doesn't wear well. This is not a popular war. This is not something where there are large swaths of the public, frankly, either in the US or Canada, who are supportive of that. Even among the Republican base, this is not a popular war. It's also something that is likely to not be over anytime soon. We don't really have a clear sense of what the purpose of it is. It does look to be a regime change war. And I'm old enough to remember when the U.S. used to bother trying to manufacture consent for such a thing. But that even hasn't been done. So there was really no basis of public support for this conflict. You are going to see support within large segments of the Iranian Canadian community. But again, as time goes on, like this is also going to be messy. We've already seen civilian casualties. We've also now seen the region being drawn in. So I think about 17 countries are now involved. This is a major, major risk in terms of setting off a wider regional conflict that's going to have huge impacts, not just for people living in the region, but security impacts on trade, impacts on energy and resources, and impacts on the market. This is, in fact, I would argue, pretty much the antithesis of the kind of action that Carney would probably have wanted to see in the Davos speech in order to try to secure prosperity for Canada, in the world that we're in. This is very destabilizing. This is really bad. And then lastly, I think, again, my problem with this statement, I disagree with endorsing the U.S. action here because I think We don't know what Trump is doing. And I think that actually Trump has shown himself to have a very bad record when it comes to actually leaving these countries better off than they were when we started. And in fact, the US more broadly has a really bad record on regime change. But again, I think that the statement and a lot of the people who are defending this statement as a reflection of the realism that Carney put forward in his Davos speech. And I do agree that it is somewhat congruent with that speech. But again, that ignores the fact that Canada participates in creating what those international norms are through our own friggin' statements. So the fact that he's out there endorsing it also contributes to creating a reality where more U.S. interventions like this become permissible as an international norm. So I think it's a risk. It's an interesting risk for him to take, because if he were just trying to deflect U.S. attention and not cause problems with Trump leading up to the renegotiation of CUSMA, then he could have been boring. He could have waited. He could have been boring. But that's not what he chose to do.
Speaking of Carney's trip, Fred, one place that Poilievre's "he's not doing anything" message will struggle, presumably, is in Saskatchewan, right? Takes Premier Mo over to China and gets the tariffs off canola, and then takes Premier Mo to India, and they sell billions of dollars worth of uranium. He's going for the Saskatchewan vote, for God's sake. You got to watch your back.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And that's the heartland of conservatism right now. So yeah, he's going right
Maybe
there.
The most conservative province. All right, we got to go to our hey yous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The hey yous are about to begin.
Scott, you got a hey you?
Well, I was tempted to send my hey you out to Peter Mansbridge, who I know quit smoking a number of years ago, and I think he handled it splendidly without a problem.
Svelte, looking good.
I mean, didn't miss a beat. My hey you is going to go. I mentioned him in passing earlier, and it's just on my mind because I watched this press conference this morning from the United States, from the Pentagon, with Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. And it's war, baby. It's not defense. It's not war. It's war. And it was such an obnoxious, ridiculous performance. And I do recognize why Carney came out quickly and how that is in keeping with Davos. And I think if Carney was here, he'd tell you that he also constrained the statement. He would say, I said I supported it insofar as to limit their nuclear program and to address their terrorist activities. However, Pete Hegseth, it was an insane, obnoxious performance. He was like, we don't know how long we're going to be there, and that's because we're not going to tell our enemies anything they need to know. He is literally the South Park parody of himself, and it was terrifying to watch, to think that the hands of the Middle East, and therefore so much of the world, and boy, these guys are going to punish regional allies of the United States. They are going to make them hurt, because these guys are fanatics and they are not for backing down. And so they are going to go to the last rock and the last stone. And you think it's in the hands of somebody this unqualified, this unjudicious, this ridiculous, and this completely obsessed with just how things look, how does he appear strong, and it's just terrifying. And so I look at this Trump administration and I just shake my head and thank God. I tremble in fear for the world.
Oh man, he's like Bluto from Animal House, eh? Did we quit when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? No.
It was one of the most embarrassing, just beer can crush on his forehead performances. Just completely ridiculous.
Fred, you got to hey you?
I do, and we haven't talked enough about Pierre Poilievre today, so I'll give a hey you to him. But actually, he's on his way or in England to do some stuff there, and I guess he's going to Germany after that. And I think it's interesting to see the leader of the opposition going out and traveling the world. A lot of people say it makes sense. It's a good idea. I'm curious to see what comes of that. He doesn't actually go out and he's not making trade deals or anything, but it is good to see him out there on a world stage, and hopefully it's positive for himself and the country. But I think that's an interesting thing he's doing.
Tricky messaging territory, right?
Very. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, it's such a 360 from how they were before. Like, he wouldn't even meet with any organizations that were involved in these kinds of trips before. And now he's taking them. So
Right.
Jordan, I know you have a hey you.
You know I do. Minister Solomon, I have a hey you for you. So AI and AI regulation, as we've talked about a little bit before, turns out it's a problem. And
at least I picked a good one. Claude. Claude is the good one.
Apparently, Claude is the good one.
Yeah.
Right.
But forgive me if I don't love these choices. As you know, as a parent and as a human existing in this world, I think we can do better. And that's really what my hey you is about to the minister. So look, the minister came to his portfolio with a really explicit push that this government was not going to focus on regulation. They were going to focus on innovation and broad-based AI adoption. But as we've seen with the tragedy in Tumbler Ridge, there is a regulatory problem. These companies are enormously powerful. They are putting out tools that Canadians are using that pose not just mental health risks, but actual security risks, public safety risks. And those things need to be governed. And I was a little astounded this week to see the minister's response that he was unhappy with what OpenAI had put forward. And he didn't really like the answers that they'd given and the fact that they hadn't come up with within 2 days after being busted for not having reported the shooter's posts to the RCMP, that within those 2 days, they hadn't developed a new mechanism to manage that. Minister, this is your job. It is your job to make sure that these companies are regulated. Right now in Canada, neither the AI companies nor social media platforms are in any way mandated to report concerning content to officials. This has to change. And the fact that your 30-day consultation that happened in the fall on how AI should be governed in Canada didn't come out with recommendations that absolutely pointed to this need shows that that was also really a flawed process. There's an opportunity here for the minister to rally multi-partisan will to get behind some proper regulation for these platforms right now in the wake of this tragedy. He needs to take it. I think to his credit, his tone has shifted a little bit over the last couple of days on these issues. I hope that he takes that seriously and he gets people together behind some legislation on this very quickly so that we don't have this circumstance again. And that's my hey you.
Very good. Thank you.
Who wrote it for you? Who wrote that
Claude.
Hey you for you, huh?
Claude.
No AI in the preparation of my moral outrage. That's all from the heart, Scott.
Are you sure you want to go down this road, Jordan?
My hey you goes out to all the governments of Canada. I was at a speech last week where Dominic LeBlanc, the minister of, among 13 other things, one Canadian economy, was speaking. And he spoke about something I haven't heard about for months and months, and that is internal free trade in Canada. And he basically threw up his hands. And I recall a year ago or less, when that was the primary commitment that governments made to us. We can give ourselves more than the United States could ever take away from us. And one of the things we were going to do was tear down internal trade barriers, which was going to have our GDP soaring and jobs being created and offsetting all the difficulty coming from the United States. And everybody seemed to agree with that, and then it all went away. And according to Dominic LeBlanc, at some point the feds passed their legislation, which is very minor in the piece, and the provinces got together on a few regs, maybe trucking, but most of it's just not happening. And the minister made it sound like it's really, frankly, off everybody's radar screen and not likely to happen. And that's kind of bullshit. Because actually we need that. And the economy is going into tough times. And this was a commitment that was made to the Canadian people by the Prime Minister, but also tacitly by every premier. So fucking do it. Just do it. If we can't do this, if these little things, this is so small compared to, listen to Stephen Harper. This is so small compared to what is going to confront us over time in this transition, that if we can't do this, I don't have a lot of faith in us to withstand the other pressures that are coming. So get back to the table and figure this out and get rid of these internal trade barriers. All right. Thank you, the three of you, for being here. Scott, a little bit less because so negative
Yeah.
about the show and about my particular role in the show.
I
But
don't-
otherwise, I want to thank the three of you for being here.
Okay.
What do you got something to say?
Oh goodness. I mean, I enjoy those podcasts where people are free to speak their own opinion without correction.
All right. Thank all you accursed who watched or listened to the show today. Thanks to the sponsors who make this show possible. And we'll see you next week with more of this banter. And I hope it's enjoyable and, if not, informative. One of those two. We're gaming for one of those two. Anyway, have a good time. See you next week. Take care of yourselves.